So for this video, I wanted to talk about every single book that I read in 2024, and then I've decided I will consider the year completely wrapped up. I don't really have any other end of year videos that I am super desperate to do. There's obviously the 2024 stats video that I could do, but I'm not sure I really want to, so maybe I'll talk about some stats at the end of this video. I just don't really want to do a whole video dedicated to them because we're already 3 weeks into January. It feels like 2024 was like months ago for me because so much has happened since then. I'm keen to just talk about these books, highlight a few favourites. I know I've already done that in my best books of the year video. In this video I'll get to talk about a few more, so I won't be quite so restricted. And then we can move on to 2025, I think. I have, 117 books to talk about. A couple of these were rereads that I reread within the same year, so probably like 112 or something. So we should get started and we should keep this quick and snappy, I think. So my first read of 2024 was Bookshops and Bone Dust. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought it was fantastic. It was an amazing companion and prequel to Legends and Lattes. I do think that the story and the beats are very, very similar to Legends and Lattes. So if you read these back to back, you're probably not going to have a great time. But if you leave a gap in between like I did, I think you'll really enjoy them if you enjoyed the first book. I reread A Good Girl's Guide to Murder and gave that 5 stars. I think I gave it 4 stars on my first read, but I just love it so much. This is a YA thriller book, you've probably all heard of it. A girl called Pip has to solve a cold case. I'm so attached to the characters in this town and all of the relationships, and especially Pip and what she's getting up to. I love this series so much, so I would highly recommend. The Second Chance Year, I gave this one 3 stars. I don't really remember much about it. It was a fun kind of speculative romance book where the main character has to live the same year again, and I do like those kinds of stories, but this one didn't really stand out for me. That's why I only gave it 3 stars. Q by Christina Dolce, I gave this one 3.5. In hindsight, I'd probably give it a 3. I don't really remember much about it, and I am wondering whether I skim read it. So this one is a dystopian book set in a world where IQ is absolutely everything, intelligence is everything. And I'm not going to talk about this too much actually, because since I read this book, the author has said some really questionable things, so I wouldn't recommend. The Emperor's Blades, this is a high fantasy book about 3 siblings whose emperor father has died, and they have to step up in various different ways. One is the heir, one is a soldier, and one is on the more political side of things. And it's a really fun story, actually, following all of them. One sibling was a little bit boring, but I'm hoping she improves in the sequel. The Princess Diaries number 6, which in the UK is called Sixtational. I gave this one 4 stars. This was a reread for me. I don't really have loads to say about it. I'm getting so sick of Michael in this series, and I really want them to break up permanently, but I know that's not going to happen. So mixed feelings about this, but it was entertaining, so I gave it 4 stars. Gift of Fear, this is a non-fiction book, my first one of the year. I think I'd been reading this for like months or something. I gave this one 4 stars. It's a really interesting book about trusting your gut feeling. When your body is telling you that you're in trouble, you should listen to it, because your brain is probably picking up on subtle changes in body language from people, or environmental changes that you can't quite comprehend, but there's probably something going on. So if you feel like you're in danger, listen. Some of the kind of examples that he used were a little bit repetitive, and I was hoping the author would go into a bit more detail in some of the stories and examples. But overall, it's a very good book and a really good message. This Wretched Valley, this is a horror book. It's really, really weird. I gave it 3.5 stars. The thing that's sticking with me about this one is the plant and environment horror of it all. And this is about a group of climbers, or some of them are climbers, and they're going to map out this valley that no one has really discovered before. And then things go horribly wrong. Only If You're Lucky. Stacey Willingham is one of my favourite authors. She writes really, really good thrillers, in my opinion, often including really good female relationships. So this one had a really interesting friendship group dynamic, and there was kind of like a Mean Girls element, and I really enjoyed it. The Justice of Kings, I gave this one 4 stars. This one is a fantasy book based on Europe, specifically Germany and France, I think. It follows a woman whose name I think is Helena, and she's telling the story of a justice to the emperor. And it was also a little bit of a murder mystery, so I really enjoyed it. I did have some questions about why Helena was telling the story of someone else and she wasn't like the main character, because she was doing a lot. I didn't actually carry on with this series. I tried reading the second book, but I didn't like it, so I've DNF'd the series, unfortunately, but this might be something that you enjoy. Tea Dragon Society, this was a really cute graphic novel series, or first book in a series, about a young girl who goes to a cafe, or a tea shop rather, and meets the dragons there and also meets a girl. and it's really adorable. I would really like to carry on with this series, but unfortunately my library is no longer stocking it, so I'm really annoyed. Something is Killing the Children, volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, all of them basically. Let's talk about them all in one go. So this is another graphic novel series. This one follows a girl called Erica, I think, Erica Slaughter, and she basically hunts monsters, and in this world monsters are manifested by children who tell stories about them. If they tell the story, the monster comes to life. Adults can't normally see them, but Erica has been brought up in this basically like monster hunting cult sort of thing, and that means that she and her colleagues are able to see monsters, hunt them, and also kind of like slaughter everyone who gets in their way. But Erica doesn't agree with this life or this cult, so she is kind of branching out by herself, and that's causing all sorts of problems. Really love this series, it's so good. I've rated multiple books in this series 5 stars, absolutely incredible. There's also a spin-off series that I haven't read yet, but I would really like to. House of Flame and Shadow, 2.5 stars. I should probably round it down to 2. I did not get on with this one. I thought it was poorly written, badly edited. The plot was boring, Blythe was boring, her love interest was boring, I can't even remember his name. The only ones that I did like, there was a stag shifter, and I think that was about it. She was the only interesting part of this book because of what was revealed about her background. And that's all I have to say about it. It was rubbish. Our Little Secret, this is a graphic memoir. It's really, really dark. It's about the author's time growing up as she was groomed by her dad's friend, or someone who he thought was his friend. It's really, really quite harrowing. I gave it 5 stars because it was so good. Just One Damn Thing After Another. This is the first book in the Chronicles of St. Mary's. I was enjoying this one up to a point, but I did start to feel like it was too long, and I wanted just to see more history stuff. I'm considering carrying on with this series now that I've had some time to like get over the disappointment of not loving it because I only gave it 3 stars. I would really like to try again, I think. I don't know whether to just read the spin-off series because I have the first book in that, or if I should go on to book 2, because I did recap this one, I think. If I haven't, then I've probably taken some notes so I can still remember most of what happened. It just dragged a bit for me. It's 480 pages and I feel like it could have been like 350. I reread the first 5 volumes of Lore Olympus, and I love this series. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling, as you all probably know. It's about the Greek gods who live in like a modern-ish version of Olympus. There's like phones and cars and stuff, and it's all about Hades and Persephone and the other gods and everything they've got going on. It's really, really good. I love this series. I was reading the webtoon because it's all published online, but then they were trying to get me to pay for the webtoon, and I was like, no, I don't think so. I will just buy the series as it comes out. A Guest in the House. This is a horror novella. I gave it 3 stars. I don't really remember anything about it, to be honest. So yeah, I think there was some sort of like mother relationship or theme to it, but I don't really know. Princess Diaries 7, again, this is a reread. This is where I started getting like really sick of Michael, and I just want him to be gone at this point. And then I started the Murderbot books, and I read All Systems Red, Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, and then I reread the first 2 books as well, that time with my husband. I listened to these on audio, absolutely incredible audiobooks. I should really carry on with this series. I think I want to reread Rogue Protocol first, because I've reread the other 2 and I remember so much about them, but not so much about the 3rd book. I gave the first book 4 stars, the second book 4.5 first, and then I gave it 5 stars upon a reread, and then Rogue Protocol I gave 4 stars. I love these books. They follow a robot called Murderbot that just wants to stay at home and watch TV, which is relatable, but it keeps getting dragged into various different situations where it tries to help the humans around it. Worst Wingman Ever by Abby Jimenez. This is a really short audiobook that I listened to via Audible. It was a really cute romance story, nothing really more to say about it really. God Killer, this is the first book in this series. It follows a woman whose family were killed by a god when she was younger. She was the only one to survive, and then she has made it her career, I think, to kill a bunch of gods. And she is kind of roped into this mission with another woman, and a guy joins in later. I only gave this 3 stars. It was kind of generic, really quite boring, and it was only, I think, like 280 pages. I feel like it could have been bulked out in that, like, the trilogy that has been planned. I feel like they could have been maybe 2 books instead. I definitely think the second book, not that I've read it, could have been attached to the first one, because I just don't feel like there was enough substance in this. No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall. I gave this one 4 stars, but it took me forever to get through this one. I don't know if it's because I was in a slight reading slump, but it felt very different to her usual thrillers. So this one is about 3 sisters who grew up in an abusive home, and then one day their parents are killed, and we don't know who's done it. The sisters aren't living at home at this point, I don't think. Maybe one of them is, but I don't remember I think they're all kind of living apart, but someone has killed the parents, and you don't know if it's one of the sisters, you don't know if it's one of the townsfolk or someone connected to the sisters. It was a really good mystery. I just felt like it dragged a little bit, and I can't remember why. Tom Lake, this was rubbish. It was so boring. This is set during pandemic times, like one of the lockdowns, and the whole family come back together, and the mum takes the opportunity to tell the kids about someone that she was into during her like TV movie days, and it's so boring. I didn't like it. Happiness Falls, this one was super disappointing, really boring as well. I was really disappointed because I really liked Miracle Creek by this author, but this one did not hold up. This is about a woman whose father and brother go off on a walk, and then the brother, who is non-verbal, comes running back, and he's trying to communicate that something has happened to their dad, but he's not able to do so. But the main character quickly figures out that their dad is missing, and there's a whole investigation about what happened. I liked the concept, but really it wasn't a good book. What was a good book though is A History of Burning. I gave this one 5 stars. It's my all-time favourite book of the year. That makes no sense. It's one of my all-time favourite books and my favourite book of the year. This tells the story of an Indian family through the generations. The first one is taken from India after signing a contract that he could not read by the British to Kenya and Uganda, to build the East African Railway, and then he's never taken back because the British just leave people there. And so he starts a family in Uganda, and it's about the family as they're kind of dealing with diaspora and wanting to connect to family in India, but them being slightly different. And then there's also a revolution happening in Uganda as well. So there's a lot going on in this book, and it's absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend it. Unearth Volume 1, I gave this one 2.5 stars. It's a graphic novel. It was really boring and weird. And then same for Luna, I gave this one 2 stars. A graphic novel, really boring and weird also. I read Mile High and The Right Move and Caught Up all at the same time, or all one after the other, not at the same time. That would be wild. I gave Mile High 5 stars, I gave The Right Move 4 stars, and I gave Caught Up 3 stars. These are all romance books, sports romance books at that, so I wasn't expecting to give Mile High 5 stars, but I absolutely loved it. It's a really long book, it's like 600 pages. It doesn't need to be, but I was actually fine with it. It follows a hockey player and a flight attendant who start off hating each other, and then they get together. And it is actually really quite intense and in depth with the relationships and the home stuff that's going on, family relationships and romantic relationships. And then The Right Move follows the flight attendant's brother and her friend, and then Caught Up follows a fellow sportsman. I can't remember what he does, baseball? That one was just alright. I didn't really care for that one as much. I haven't carried on with the series yet, but I would really like to, maybe in February. Ordinary Human Failings, I gave this one 2 stars. I don't remember anything about it, so I can't really speak on it. I think it was quite boring from what I can remember. The 3-Body Problem, this one was also quite boring, but I remember a bit more about it. It's a sci-fi book, it's translated from Chinese into English, and I can't tell if I just don't like Ken Liu's translation style, because I don't seem to like his own writing, and I haven't loved anything he's translated, so I can't tell if it's the style of translation or if it's the authors themselves. I don't like their books, I don't know, but this one just sort of dragged. It was really boring and I couldn't get into it. The Kaiju Preservation Society, this one is about dinosaurs, so of course I loved it. I gave it 4 stars. I actually forgot that I read this, and now that I'm thinking about it again, I'm so glad I did because it was so much fun. It's like an action-packed sci-fi book. Really enjoyed it. The Mimicking of Known Successes, I gave this one 3 stars. Again, I don't remember much about it. It's kind of like a gay female Sherlock and Watson situation set on Jupiter. So it's a murder mystery. And it was good. It was fine. Rolling in the Deep. This one is a novella set before Into the Drowning Deep, and I enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars. It was very good, but not as good as a full-length book, because we all know how I feel about short stories. And then I read Parasite, which I gave 4.5 stars. I should probably give it 5 because this was absolutely incredible. It's space horror about aliens that take over the brain. Super creepy, has some really like gory moments and also really like off-putting, edge of your seat, like spine tingling moments as well. And I'd really like to reread this one, and I might do actually in February as well. The Girl Who Could Move Shit With Her Mind. This one was a action thriller thing about people with superpowers, particularly the main character with superpowers. She can do what it says in the title. It was all right. I didn't like the humour in it, and I didn't really love the author's writing style, so I gave it 3 stars. I don't think I'll carry on with this series. I've basically DNF'd it in my mind at this point. Unwind by Neil Schusterman. This was a reread for me. I gave it 4 stars. This has one of the creepiest, horrific scenes I've ever read, and I'd actually forgotten a little bit about it before I reread it. And then once I reread it, I was like, oh my god, this one has like actually stuck with me, and it's like in the deep crevices of my brain. It's really quite upsetting. Like really upsetting. And then I also read Unholy, the second book, which I also really enjoyed, so I gave both of those 4 stars. The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. I really enjoyed this actually. I didn't love Five Survive, but this one I felt had a little bit more of that original feeling from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. I don't love that she's now setting her books in the US because I don't think they've got the same feel, but this one has sort of like family relationships and really emotional stuff in there, so I much preferred this to Five Survive. Hostage, this one is a aeroplane thriller. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars, probably more of a 3, because it's quite forgettable for a thriller book. Can't really remember much about it apart from the main character being a senior flight attendant, and she really wanted to go back to work after having a baby or something, and there's some like drama between her and her partner involving like childcare and stuff and women's careers. I'm sure there's like some sort of like message there, but it was just okay. It was a good thriller. I reread Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson. Absolutely loved it. Gave it 5 stars. It's incredible. I've basically spoken about Pip when I spoke about A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, so I won't go into too much detail now. But this one has some really shocking moments, and it's really like the start of things starting to turn and become even darker than they were in the first book. And it kind of sets things up for the third one. The Wolf of Oren-Yari, this is a fantasy book. I gave it 2 stars. I thought it was boring, it dragged, didn't really connect with any of the characters at all. The Measure, this is a literary sci-fi-ish book about everyone receiving a piece of string in a box, and this piece of string tells you how long you've got left to live. And so people can choose not to look inside the box and see, but most people obviously do because they're very curious. And it's kind of about what this knowledge does to people. And in some cases, it's kind of like, would they have actually had this long to live if they hadn't looked inside the box and just left things alone? Or was the reason they had that long to live because they looked inside the box? And I find that kind of stuff really interesting. And it actually feels like I read this book like 3 years ago, but I'm surprised to say it was only May last year. It's a very good book. I would definitely recommend it. I gave it 3.5 stars. I've still got it on my shelf because it's one that I would like to reread and like pick apart the themes and stuff. Sweet Tooth, I read all of the volumes. I think there were 3, maybe 4. This is a horror dystopia sort of book. Children start being born with like animal features like limbs, faces, hooves, and our main character is called Sweet Tooth. He lives in a cabin with his dad. Sweet Tooth has antlers and I think hooves, I can't remember, maybe not. He's definitely got antlers. And then he is taken when his dad dies by a man, and then it starts like an epic journey. It's a Netflix series that I haven't seen yet, but I would really like to. It's definitely on my list because I love this series. I gave all of the volumes 4 stars, I think. They have such like heart to them. I got really attached to all of the characters, and they're also really brutal. Bride by Ali Hazelwood, loved this one, gave it 4.5 stars. It's about a vampire and a werewolf and political marriages and stuff. Lots of fun. Everyone knows about the knotting as well, so that's not a spoiler. What can I say? I enjoyed it. I read Unsold by Neil Shusterman as well, I forgot to say, and I gave it 2 stars, and it's really put me off finishing the series, which is really annoying because the whole reason I was rereading was to finish the series. But I have not liked this book twice now, and I don't know if I can bring myself to read the 4th book. If you've read the 4th book, tell me if you think I should bother finishing off the series. It's a shame to DNF it after however many years, but I just don't think I can do it. Bad Things Happen Here. This is a mystery book. I didn't enjoy it. I gave it 2.5 stars. It's a YA mystery, and I don't really remember much about it apart from the main character being really annoying. When I Was 10, this is another mystery thriller book. I can't remember much about the plot other than someone killed their parents, I think, or is said to have killed their parents. It was very engaging, very thrilling. I gave it 3 stars because it's just like a standard thriller set in the UK. I don't think there was really anything special about it. Star Splitter, this is a sci-fi book. I gave this one 3 stars. This one ended up being really fun and thrilling. I was reading this as I was trying to discover what I really like in sci-fi thriller horror books, and it's not this. So this is YA. It's all kind of basic and or standard. It doesn't really stand out at all. The first couple of 100 pages were really good, and then by the end it just sort of like fizzled out, so I didn't love that so much, but I liked the concepts and the ideas and things, and it was alright. I gave it 3 stars. The One by John Mars. This is a sci-fi thriller book. I enjoyed this one. I'm not sure it really needed to be told partly from a serial killer's point of view, but I did enjoy that John Mars was trying to put a little bit of a twist on this thriller book, and I enjoyed it enough to think that I'm going to read the rest of his sci-fi thrillers because I think he does quite a few of them, and I really enjoy his concepts. This one is about everyone being matched with the one who is apparently like the perfect person for them, and whether or not that's true is kind of up for debate. I read the whole Naturals series, all 4 books and the novella, and I absolutely loved it. I read the Naturals when I was a lot younger, and then I reread it this year to carry on with the series, and this series is so good. It's so much better than the Hawthorne books that Jennifer Lynn Barnes writes. This one is fantastic. It's like Criminal Minds, but for teens, I would say. Each teen has like a specialty, and they can help with cold cases or current murder cases. And it's so, so good. I'd highly recommend it. I got really attached to all the characters. The final book in the series, the final full-length book, some parts of it were kind of convoluted, I thought, and it was a bit of a stretch for me to believe. But because I really enjoyed all the characters up to that point, I didn't really mind that that was the case. I was kind of viewing it as sort of like the ending or the finale to a really long TV series. And so I suspended my disbelief a lot there. I read The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret. I gave the first one 4 stars and the second one 2 stars. So the quality dropped massively. And I don't think it's that the quality dropped. I think it's that I read them both so close together and the plots were so similar. I don't think Frida McFadden is doing anything unique with her books, but the first one I really enjoyed the kind of like thrillingness of it, the way that it kept me captivated, and I just couldn't put the book down. It's not the most well written book by any means, but it did its job. I wanted a quick thriller book to read in bed, and that's what this was. And then I rated The Housemaid's Secret 2, partly because I was disappointed that I didn't love it, and I noticed all of the similarities, but also because I didn't love the plot in the same way. It just didn't captivate me in the same way, so that's why I gave it 2, even though I did keep reading it really quickly. City of Nightmares, I can't remember anything about this one. The beginning was good. I remember there might have been an explosion of some sort. That's all I remember. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I hated this. I gave it 2 stars. I probably should have given it a 1. This is poorly written. There's a female character who dies in order to progress the plot of the main character. There's a awful love triangle, and it's basically a Red Queen ripoff. So I don't like this at all, and I'm definitely not carrying on with the series. If you want a recap of this, by the way, it's on my website, Recaptions, just saying. Raiders of the Lost Heart. This is a really fun rom-com about archaeologists, rival archaeologists who are in the rainforest. I think the Amazon rainforest, I'm fairly sure. I don't really have much more to say about it. I enjoyed it a lot. From Below by Darcy Coates. This is another sci-fi horror book by her. This one is set under the sea, and it's really creepy. And I gave it 4 stars. It's not as good as Parasite, I didn't think, but it was super creepy. It's partially set when they're diving into an abandoned ship or a shipwreck under the sea, and weird things are happening there. In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. This is the only thriller book where I have actually had a really intense ship, and I've been actively wanting the characters to get together. That very rarely happens. I can't remember the last time it's happened in a thriller book if it's not been a series. So I gave this one 3.5 stars, partly for that, and partly because I think it was written absolutely fantastically. So I would recommend. We Used to Live Here. I gave this one 5 stars. It's a horror book. It has an ending that's going to divide a lot of people, I think. Some people won't like the ending and how sort of unfinished, or it's not even unfinished, how open the ending is, and others are going to really enjoy it. But I think because it's a horror book, it's allowed to have that kind of ending because it's meant to sort of like just stop and leave you thinking and leave you wondering what the hell is going on. I think horror books can do that. I found this one really chilling, really creepy, and really quite upsetting in some ways. The physical book, I'm not sure about the audiobook, has some codes in it as well, and I had a lot of fun figuring those out. I would actually like to reread this one and just start again because it was so good. The Serpent and the Wings of Night. This one is a fantasy romantasy book, the first in the series. I enjoyed this one a lot, so much so that I also recapped it on here. This is kind of like The Hunger Games in that it has the sort of games or challenges, but I don't think everything that has games or challenges has to be compared to The Hunger Games, to be honest, because The Hunger Games is more than just the games. It's about the entire society and world. I wouldn't really compare it to The Hunger Games other than the games happening. This is actually about vampires and their society and their stuff that they've got going on, and gods and goddesses and stuff. Really enjoyed it. I also read the second book, Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. I was a bit hesitant going into it because the ending to Serpent has one line that really annoys me, and I don't think it should have been in there. And so I wasn't sure how the author would handle that in the second book, and as far as I can remember, she doesn't even bring it up, which is really quite annoying. I think I gave Ashes 4 stars. I think I would have liked the romance to have dragged out a little bit more because the main character should have been really bloody annoyed with the love interest. So I would have preferred a longer gap between her forgiving him and getting back together with him. But Ashes does have a really creepy scene with a bunch of children, vampire children. That has stuck with me. That was really creepy. I enjoyed both of them, and I'm looking forward to reading the third book sometime soon. The Last Housewife. This is another Ashley Winstead book. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It's kind of about 3 students who are being groomed by a guy who clearly wants to start a cult. And it's told in 2 timelines. So you see them as they meet this man, and then you see one of the main characters investigating the death of one of her friends. It was interesting, it was, but I don't think I would ever reread this one. It was just an okay thriller, and it was very well written because I think Ashley Winstead is a very talented writer. It just wasn't my favourite subject matter, I don't think. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This one was a 5-star read. I absolutely loved it. I loved Emma, I loved Justin, and it's honestly, you can tell that I loved it by the fact that I can remember their names, because that never happens to me. I love this one so much, and there's a little bit of a twist in there as well. If you're not like obsessed with Abby Jimenez's books, which I wasn't up until this point, there's a bit of a twist in there that I didn't see coming, and I screamed. The Last Thing He Told Me, 3 stars, generic thriller, don't really remember anything about it. More of a crime book actually than a thriller, I would say. It's like a TV episode, I think. One Perfect Couple by Ruth Ware. This is set on a very sunny island until there's a storm, which takes some people out, and then the contestants on this TV show are trapped there, and they have to survive for a while and kind of get along with each other, except bickering starts right away. I read Stolen Lives, which is a non-fiction book about modern day human trafficking, and it's very, very interesting. I gave this one 4 stars, and I've retained a lot from it, and I've kept the book as well, so I can keep referring to it as needed. The author did a lot of research and really knew her stuff, and she referenced so many things in this book, like so many different resources and places that you can go for help or for more research, so I'd recommend this book. Her Majesty's Royal Coven and The Shadow Cabinet. I gave the first book 5 stars and the second book 3.5. Her Majesty's Royal Coven and the sequel are obviously about a coven of witches. It mainly follows 4 friends. They're very humorous. I do think that Juno Dawson's writing is just very in your face and loud, and that's not necessarily a problem. It's not my preferred writing style, but I loved it for the most part nonetheless. Obviously I gave the first book 5 stars. The Shadow Cabinet, the second book, it kind of meandered a little bit and it was a bit too long, and I feel like Juno Dawson doesn't really know what to do with one of the characters and just keeps kind of shoving her into situations that don't really connect with the rest of the book. So that was really disappointing for me, because I was expecting to give the second book 5 stars as well, but I just couldn't. But it's a very good series, and I have actually recently read Queen Bee and enjoyed that, so I'm looking forward to the 3rd book when it comes out, hopefully this year. 6 Scorched Roses. I probably should have included this when I talked about Serpent and the Wings of Night. This is the novella which follows 2 characters who are said to show up in the second book, Ashes, but in reality they're barely there. I mean, they are there, they're in some scenes, but the female main character, whose name I can't remember, she doesn't have any dialogue, or if she does, she has like 1 line. This novella was kind of pointless in my opinion, but I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I reread Catching Jordan. I read this for the first time when I was a lot younger, like I was basically a teenager, I think. This is a YA contemporary that follows Jordan, who is a high school American football player, and she is like one of the lads and stuff, and she often looks down on the girly girls and things, but she comes to realise that girly girls are okay, not the mean girls that she is kind of expecting them to be. I really enjoyed the relationship between her and her dad, which I don't think I really appreciated the first time I read it, but I really enjoyed reading about that and the developments there. Last Seen Online. This is a YA contemporary, kind of a thriller, action thriller kind of book about a main character who meets a famous guy, or the son of a famous actress, and there's some sort of mystery there. I can't remember exactly what it is. I can if I like dig deep, but I can't find the words to explain. Basically, his mum knew someone who was murdered, and that's the connection there. And the main character is looking into this murder, from what I can remember. Something like that. It was good. I gave it 4 stars. I promise I enjoyed it. The Ministry of Time, I gave this one 1 star. I hated it. It was so boring, really dragged out, didn't like it. The Examiner, this is another Janice Hallett book. I gave this one 3 stars, which I think is the lowest I've rated any of her books. It's told in mixed media. It's about a group of students of varying ages. They go to an art college and work on projects together. And then there's a whole like mystery there as well. And in true Janice Hallett fashion, you don't really know what the mystery is until like halfway through. I feel like this book was a little bit too long. There are some twists and turns in there, and the ending was kind of like a comedic moment, it felt like I don't really know how to explain it, but there was definitely some like comedy in there, I feel. So I enjoyed it, but it's the least memorable one of her books for me, I think. Wayward, this was part of my witchy reading vlog that I did, and I've discovered that I really love witch books. This one is told in several timelines following witches of different ages, and they're all connected in some way. Really enjoyed it, gave it 3.5 stars. I really liked the way that this was told. I really got connected with most of the characters, at least 2 of the 3 main characters. The third one, I still liked her, but you know, not as much as the other 2. And yeah, it's what really showed me that I do really enjoy witch books. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon, I gave this one 3 stars. It's just a standard rom-com romance book about a witch and a demon. There are also some environmental climate saving elements in there, which I really enjoyed, and I found that that's something that I really enjoy about witch books. They do focus on witches' connections with nature and how they sort of live with nature. So I also read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I gave it 5 stars. I've spoken about this in my Best Books of the Year video. Absolutely incredible, such a lovely, cozy book, and I can't wait to read what I think is going to be the companion book when it comes out this year. Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman, I gave this one 3 stars. It was okay, it's a horror book. It's told from the child's point of view, and I know a lot of people have a problem with that, but I didn't really mind. That wasn't my issue with it. I think I didn't like the parents. I didn't like the fact that the parents' attitudes and actions weren't always addressed, or were always addressed. They often weren't addressed. So I was not a fan of that, and the book kind of just dragged along. So gave it 3 stars. Heads Will Roll. This is a slasher horror set at a retreat sort of camp thing, where people go to switch off from social media and technology. Really enjoyed this one, had a lot of fun with it. It's gory in the right places. It's got a thrilling like chase scene, several thrilling chase scenes. Really enjoyed it. This World Is Not Yours, I gave this one 2 stars, probably should have been a 1. This is meant to be a space horror book, but it's actually more of a domestic book. A book about people with very severe domestic issues who probably need therapy. Oathbringer Part 1 and Part 2, I gave Part 1 3 stars and Part 2 2.5 stars, because I feel like these books are just dragging now. I think Brandon Sanderson just needs to get on with it. I do like some of the characters in this, not Shallon, but I do really like Cal and Adeline, Dalinar, of course, Yasna, but a lot of this book did focus on Shallon, and I cannot get on board with her character. I just find her really boring. She is like the Elend of this series, and I don't like Elend at all. He is really dull. So, not a fan. I am going to carry on with the series, but I'm only going to read one more book before deciding whether I'm going to DNF in it or not. The Phoenix Keeper, this is a cozy fantasy book set in a magical zoo. Really enjoyed this one, gave it 4 stars. Lots of like really good fantasy elements with all the different creatures. A really good romance, I thought, and a really good action-packed ending as well. The only thing I would say is that the main character in this one is really quite annoying and really quite awful to her friends, and that's not really addressed to the level that I would want it to be. Like, I wanted them to like lay into her verbally to tell her to get it together and respect people, but she didn't really, and that never really happened. Last One at the Wedding, I gave this one 2 stars. Don't really want to talk about it. It's a thriller book, kind of, but that's not really very thrilling, and I don't like the author. So moving on. Dead of Winter by Darcy Coates, I gave this one 4 stars. It's a snowy thriller set in the mountains and people start getting killed off one by one. It's so good. The Women by Kristen Hanna, this is historical fiction, and it's about a woman who goes to be a nurse in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and it's kind of about how women kind of went over there and were completely forgotten about. They weren't supported, they weren't respected, because they were only nurses and not doctors. No one really had any respect for them. And then when they came back, no one believed that they were over there. And so it's dealing with PTSD, mental health issues, trauma, all of that delightful stuff. My only issue with this one is it's a little bit too long, and I feel like everything that could happen to the main character, everything bad that could happen to her, did happen to her. And at some point I was just kind of like, oh my god, can we stop? Can we like start on the good stuff, please? Let's get a bit positive here. When the Moon Hatched, I gave this one 3.5 stars. It's not the best written book, and I will be the first to tell you, like, it's generic and it's fine, but I did find the middle of the book really entertaining, and I loved the bond that the princess, let's say, had with her dragon. Absolutely stunning to read. It's way too long, it's like 700 pages, and I would say only like 300 pages were any good, but I enjoyed it and I'm looking forward to the next book. The Storm We Made, I gave this one 3 stars. This one was alright. I don't really have much to say about it. It's set in Malaysia during World War II, and it's told in 2 timelines. One where the main character is assisting a Japanese spy who is after information from the British to then be able to invade Malaysia. The second timeline is set after the invasion when the Japanese have already occupied Malaysia. and how this family is dealing with that. It follows the same family, all different points of view. It's absolutely harrowing and awful what happens to these people. I just don't think the author wrote it in the best way. I don't think this is the best written book, and it's only a debut, and I do find it quite impressive that this was her debut book and this is what she wanted to tackle, but it wasn't the best, I didn't think. A Dowry of Blood, I listened to this on audio and I gave it 5 stars. It was absolutely incredible. I'd really like to listen to it again. This follows the story of one of Dracula's wives and how she's dealing with the fallout of her abusive relationship, and she talks about her whole story, about how she met Dracula all the way up to his death. I loved it. I thought it was incredible. Cannot recommend this enough. Somewhere Beyond the Sea, I gave this one 4 stars. I feel like it didn't really need to be written, but I'm glad that I read it at the same time. I feel like everything wrapped up in a really happy way, and that's fine. That's just not really my favourite kind of ending, I think. I want a bit more like disaster, trauma, blood and gore, but that's not what this story is, to be fair. Like, it's not meant to be. I did really enjoy it. I really enjoyed being back with this family and seeing them basically try to take down the government because the government are arseholes. Disney High, I gave this one 4 stars. I listened to it on audio. This is a non-fiction book. I don't think it really told me anything that I didn't already know about the Disney Channel and its stars, which is why I didn't rate it higher, but at the same time I really enjoyed my time with it the entire time. Dread Nation, this is a YA horror zombie book, and I enjoyed it. Nothing really much to say. I'm not going to carry on with the series because I just gave it 3 stars. It was enjoyable, and that's all I really have to say. This Cursed House, this one I gave 4 stars. It's another horror book. It's also historical. I think it's set in 70s, the 60s maybe, which is historical. I very much enjoyed this one. It was a tiny bit too long. Even at 380 pages, I thought it was like a tiny bit too long for the story, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed reading about the different family relationship, about what the main character had to go through, about what her mother had to go through as well at times, because this family that the main character has to go and live with are absolutely awful. But it was kind of satisfying, kind of reading about how awful they could be and then what happened to them after that. I'm trying to be vague and not spoil anything, so that's all I'm going to say on that. This was a really good book. Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This one is a crime fiction book, I think, thriller, set in Australia. Just why I read it so soon, just before I went to Australia. And I gave this one 3 stars. It was kind of more of a humorous book, and I don't always get on well with that because it very much depends on the author's sense of humour. His sense of humour doesn't match up with mine. I really enjoyed the fact that there were clues left throughout this book and the author made it clear that there would be clues. I really love solving a good mystery. I do want to read his second book as well because I do think I will like it. This one just didn't blow me away, really. Dinner for Vampires, this one is by Bethany Joy Lenz and it's about her time in a cult. It doesn't really talk much about her time on One Tree Hill. It talks about a few things to do with it, but because she was mainly isolated from her co-stars and the rest of the crew by her cult family, she doesn't really get to talking much about her time on the show, which might also be for the best because I know that she has spoken a lot about the show in her podcast and about some experiences that she and her co-stars had while on it. Maybe it's a good thing that this book mainly focused on her time in the cult and how it was affecting her personal life rather than, and also her career, of course. And then the final book of the year that I read was The Crimson Moth, and I gave it 4 stars. It was such a good ending to the year. This is a YA romantasy book, or at least that's how it's being pitched. I would say it's just a YA fantasy book. It's about a witch and a witch hunter who are basically using each other for information, and they start a fake relationship in order to, not that either one of them knows that it's fake, they're trying to seduce the other to gain information. The witch hunter Gideon is trying to find the Crimson Moth, who keeps releasing witches because witches are being hunted in this book. Rune is the Crimson Moth, and she wants to use Gideon because he knows where some witches are being kept. And so there's a lot of like back and forth cat and mouse stuff. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, gave it 4 stars and I can't wait for the sequel. So I have no idea how long this video is. My jaw hurts from talking so much because I've not done a video this long in ages, but I hope this gave you some idea of how my year went. It was a really good reading year overall. Actually, I will look at some stats really quickly. My average rating was 3.9, which is absolutely incredible. That's nearly 4 stars. My best reading months were February, when I read 26 books. I thought I read 28, but maybe not. I'm sure I did, but I don't want to have a look. And then my worst reading month was July, when I read 4 books. Can't remember why July was so bad, so I don't need to talk about it. I had 12 5-star reads, which is absolutely incredible. I mainly read books from the library which was surprising. I wasn't expecting that. And the second most read were TBR books that I bought prior to 2024. My most read genres were thriller and horror, with fantasy coming up a close second. My most common rating was 4 stars, which is absolutely amazing. I love that for me. And then I think those are all the stats that I really think are worth talking about. Not much really went on in 2024. I just felt like it was a good reading year with no drama, and it was just fine. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on any of these books below. Let me know if you like this video and I can do it again next year, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.